Both the mother and longtime partner of late Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick are pushing to establish a January 6th commission. They are requesting meetings with all Republican senators to urge them to vote for the independent panel. The two women want more answers about the officer's death. Sicknick suffered 2 strokes and died of natural causes a day after confronting rioters on January 6th. His mother, Gladys, released a scathing letter yesterday that reads in part, Brian and his fellow officers fought for hours and hours against those animals who were trying to take over the Capitol building and our democracy as we know it. Not having a January 6th commission to look into exactly what occurred is a slap in the faces of all the officers who did their jobs that day. I suggest all congressmen and senators who are against this bill visit my son's grave in Arlington National Cemetery, and while there, think about what their hurtful decisions will do to those officers who will be there for them going forward. Putting politics aside, wouldn't they want to know the truth of what happened on January 6th? If not, they do not deserve to have the jobs they were elected to do. That is Brian Sicknick's mother, Gladys. Casey, how in good conscience could any senator, Republican or Democrat, turn down a request for a meeting from a fallen officer?
I don't know, Willie. I mean, that letter is a punch in the gut. I mean, this woman, her son died protecting all of them. And if you say no to that, I don't think I could get up in the morning myself. Yeah. I'm speaking from an emotional place here, not necessarily from a reporting point of view. But, what we've seen from Republicans on that score is clearly a willingness to say, nope, we're going to put politics first. We're going to put our electoral politics first. We're going to say we want to win the midterm elections. We're not going to have a chance to do that if we're talking about this in a year and a half. And so we're not going to do it. That's the reality.
So, Mike, it's bad enough that we've heard members of Congress, we've heard senators say, yeah, they look like tourists strolling through the statuary hall, that, they wasn't as bad as the media has made it out to be, as we've seen the video time and again of police officers being beaten in many cases within inches of their life. Officer Fanone is on the ground under there pleading for his life, thinking about his 4 daughters and how they would go on without him. He survived, thank God, despite a heart attack from what we're watching right here. But to not honor the mother of the officer who died with a meeting, which is the very least a senator or a congressman or woman could do, as Casey said, how do you look yourself in the mirror?
I don't know how they do that, Willie. I really do not know how they do that. This is deeply, deeply depressing. It's depressing every day we talk about it, and we've been talking about it every day since January 6th. But there's an edge to the depression in terms of how depressing it is when you speak about it today. We are right on the advent of Memorial Day weekend. Memorial, the root of memorial is memory. And it used to be a much larger day in America than it is today. When I was growing up, Memorial Day was a huge day with a parade and flags and Little League games. But always, always woven into Memorial Day was a trip to a cemetery to honor and remember men and women, but largely men who served in World War II and Korea. I remember those days vividly right now as we speak. January 6th was an attack on America, as was September 11th, an attack on America. But now the difference is we have an entire political party, it seems, the Republican Party, determined to erase memory, not to live with memory, not to learn from memory, not to honor those who died in every battle sense or on January 6th. And Michael Steele, again, I hesitate to come to you because you're carrying so much of the burden here in trying to explain the inexplicable. And the inexplicable happens to be Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy, Congressman Scalise, and so many others, over 140 members of the House of Representatives who voted not to legitimize the election, the legitimate election of the President of the United States on January 6th. Later in the day, after the Capitol was vandalized. What is wrong with these people? You know many of them. What is wrong with them?
I don't think there's a couch big enough for the answer to that question. I think Casey put her finger on it. It's the politics. It is the politics of expediency. It's not even fear of a base anymore. It may have started out that way. It's acquiescence and acceptance that the tail will wag the political dog. That Trump sitting down at his modern day Elba known as Mar-a-Lago can dictate the terms of engagement for the rest of the party, declare himself still the head of the party, and make those kinds of decisions, and to have a feckless leadership represented by the likes of McCarthy and others who refuse to say, excuse me, we're going to go in a different direction now. Oh, you lost the House for us, you lost the Senate for us, and you lost the White House for us. I think we've done enough losing, but they're not done. And that's the harsh reality here. Brian Sicknick's mother, the wound of a mother at the loss of a child, is one of the most profound wounds we can ever know. And yet, when she reaches out from that space to ask for help and clarity and understanding, and there's hesitation and resistance to just meet with her and to talk to her and to hear her plea that you get to the core reason why her son died, protecting them. That's unspeakable, and it says to me at least how depraved you've become, how unserious you are about such things. Remember, these are the same people. Members of my party were the first to speak to how the family is impacted and what this means for a mother and what this means for a family member, and to push that narrative out there and push back against the politics. Now they stand in whole opposition to that. And I don't think I can say to the American people is, you can stop this. You have an election coming up starting this November. And you have to make very clear what direction you want your leaders to lead in. You want to lead in the way that they do from a mother and her plea, or do you want a leader who will lead into that? So I don't understand, the Republicans at this point. I've stopped trying for a while now. My goal is to try to set a different course, a different conversation, and to hold that up. And we'll see where we go from there, because the rest of it makes no sense. And I think we waste time trying to figure out what's in the mind of people who clearly have no heart.
Well, Gladys Sicknick will be up on Capitol Hill today. She'll be knocking on the doors of Republicans. We'll see how many open the doors and take the meeting. For her part, Liz Cheney tweeted out yesterday, #I'm with Gladys. So at least one person will take the meeting.